Welcome back to Away and Abroad. Today I'm going to be sharing what it was like for me to live in New York for 10 years. So I think I'll go through this chronologically, obviously, and then by neighborhood that I lived in. So getting there was kind of a crazy story in and of itself. Back in 2015, I had just graduated from college the year before. I worked through going to school at night. So I was going to school with like all these adults and working adults who were like on to their second careers kind of thing. I was not sure what I wanted to do after that. I really loved my life in Minneapolis. I had such a great group of friends, dancing friends, a great book club, amazing roommates. Everything was like really perfect. And I always look back at my age 25 year as like this time capsule that was just so perfect. It was like the job was good, everything was good. Anyway, I knew there was something kind of eating at me that I knew I wanted to live on the East Coast. I had visited a couple of times because I had relatives who lived in Pennsylvania, and the East Coast just always stood out to me because like all the cities that were close together, and New York, of course, was just like, it seemed like the place to go. And I was an artist as well. I had a business background that I planned to get a business job or a job working in an office while I either made the transition to be an artist or do them both or whatever. I just was kind of open to whatever happened. So my coworker and cousin at the time suggested this place he heard of from someone he knew called the Webster Apartments. And it's an all women's dorm type situation where you rent a room. They charge you based on how much money you're making, either through an internship or a job. And then they provide meals. It's very old fashioned, so you can't have any guests beyond the first floor. And the apartment is in Hell's Kitchen in basically Midtown Manhattan. And so I had that in the back of my mind of like, okay, this is where I could start, I can move to as step one. So the other step was getting a job. And a lot of people, pick up and leave with like a big savings or whatever. I just started applying and I put my resume on Indeed, and an architecture firm reached out for a receptionist office manager role. And so this is like probably the most ballsy thing I've ever done. I had a phone screening with them and they're like, so are you in New York or, what's the thing? And I was like, I'm in transition, like I'm moving there like currently right now, even though I had not started at all. So they're like, okay, could you come in next week for an interview? And I was like, yes. And within the day or so, I booked a trip to New York, booked an Airbnb in Park Slope. I wasn't too familiar with the neighborhoods at all at the time, but looking back, I think I've even passed this Airbnb multiple times now, and I was like, yeah, that was a good choice. So I knew one friend as well, Amanda, from the all-girls school I went to in Alabama, which is a whole nother story. But I went there for just my freshman year, and we kind of loosely kept in touch over the years. But other than her, I didn't know anyone else in the city. So I booked this Airbnb. I lined up an interview. I had applied to a couple other places. I think I heard back from one, happened to line that up as well, which is kind of crazy that I had so many options within like the same time frame. I don't know. That's just like crazy looking back. But the other place was more of an accounting role at a photo studio. I was able to kind of schedule those two at the same time. So I felt really good about that. And then within like a week of the interview, I received the offer from the architecture firm. I think that was the only one. I don't think I really had to choose. And so I was like, great. I will move there. I need to give my office 2 weeks notice. I pack up my life within like 2.5 weeks. And me and my roommates we love to have house parties. And so we had this beautiful, big fall house party as a going away. And it was like so sweet and fun. And so bittersweet too, just saying goodbye to my roommates and friends I made within the past year or so. And yeah, it was so sad to leave them behind. And I again look at that night as just like, oh, you had no idea what you were leaving behind, but also you had no idea what was ahead. So I packed up like I think 2 suitcases and stayed with my friend Amanda for the first week of going to this job, because I think it took some time to process the paperwork with the Webster apartments and then move there. So that was that whole transition. And 6 months in or so to the job, it was okay. The office wasn't super sociable. And I mean, I was learning the first lesson of what it was like to move to a new city. I do feel kind of bad for being so green. Like, it definitely wasn't my fault, but like when you've lived in New York for a while, then you meet someone fresh to the city, there's just like quite a learning curve that goes along with just the culture of New York and how to interact with people. And I kind of cringe at the thought of like who I was when I first moved there, but it's, everyone goes through it. So anyway, 6 months in go by and I just was feeling like this itch to quit. I was like, I just feel like I'm in the city. I have to like take big risks and live big, and I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time that were like, yeah, you just gotta jump and like the net will appear kind of thing. And I resented those speakers for a while because usually they leave out crucial details of the net appearing, and that net may be your parent either being able to fund you some money here and there, or a partner who can kind of support the two of you, or you living with like a bunch of roommates or whatever the case is. But I just felt like that needs to have a huge caveat on it before you just say quit. Like, I'll never give that advice to anybody, to just quit their job and things will work out. That's great if you can do that. So I quit my job and I started work at a coffee shop, and I realized very quickly how much of a salary difference that makes. And I was like, oh man, I think I need to move out of the Webster. Like, it just got to be really expensive very quickly. So during that time, within the 6 months, I started going to this church in Harlem, and church was important to me at the time. And I met some really great people, and their community was all based there in Harlem. And so I was like, sure. And then like someone in the summer had a sublease. And so I was like, let me just move there for a little bit and then figure things out. So I did that, and I quit the coffee shop job, I think maybe just a few months in, because I found this job working as a camp photographer at a summer camp in Westchester. Working with children of wealthier parents is unique. And so it was kind of the first introduction to a type of marketing that I had never experienced before. And I really did not like this job at all. There were probably like 12 groups of kids, like boys, girls, all ages. And so my job as a photographer had to get like a group photo every week of all these, I think all the kids, and them in an activity, them doing this thing, them doing whatever, and also capture them at a time when they looked engaged and they looked happy to be there, So it was tricky. So that was kind of the start of my freelance career, briefly. And then I think I got a little burnt out from just the summer and doing that, and kind of like I realized how difficult it was to just like get photography work, because there are so many artists in the city. There's so many photographers, and it really, like, it's just who you know, and 6 to 9 to 12 months in, like I was barely scratching the surface on connections in the city. So, and they say it takes about 2 years to get like totally integrated with New York. And I would say that's true. Like it's a lot to push through and muscle through for like 2 solid years before you can kind of feel like somewhat of an ease of like even just getting around the subway, not feeling like you're in someone's way or, you know, whatever. So, okay, moving on from summer camp. I think it was shortly after that someone through my church their office was looking for a receptionist. This was the last time I was a receptionist, because it was kind of like a WeWork, just like a shared office space, but more like archaic. But the office location was really cool. I really loved going from Harlem to Grand Central, and like I walked through Grand Central every day. But one day, November 1st, I'll never forget it because it felt very strategic. Like I felt like they wanted to fire me before this time, but I think they didn't really have like cause, you know. So I was late one day, and maybe this was the day they planned to fire me anyway. I don't know. But I walk in a little late, and I was like, and then 2 people who were kind of like in charge of the place of hiring my position and stuff, they were there, and they're like, this is your last day, or like you're fired like right now. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm so sorry. I've never been written up before. It was kind of crazy like how it all happened. I was just in shock, and I was like, is there any way you'd reconsider? And they're like, no, just no. And it's so unexpected, because I'm like, I wish I would have asked like, why, other than like right now. I don't know. It didn't matter because I really hated the job anyway. And I was like, whatever, I can go get unemployment and be done. So I like didn't know what to do with myself, you know, because I'm like, well, I was supposed to be here. Now I don't know where to go. So I just remember going to Central Park. It was like kind of close. I think I just walked 20 blocks, you know, and it was like kind of chilly, but I texted my friend Nora, and she worked kind of in the area near Rockefeller Center. And she's like, let's just meet for lunch and let's, you know, we can talk. And she's like, she was such a great friend to have that day, because she's like, this is totally great. This is your opportunity to like move on, move forward, find something new, you know? And I was like, yeah. You know, so I mean, it depends on what you've done, but I don't look at being fired as a bad thing. Like usually there's a mismatch of some kind, you know, and I think we hold on to jobs maybe longer than we should sometimes, because we're like, we just need the money, and there's a bit of a scarcity mentality. And like I said, I'm not someone who just tells people to up and leave their jobs, because, you know, it's a risk. But, it was fine. This began a 2.5-year journey of freelancing, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try again, and I'm going to really, you know, give it 110%. So I went home, and one of the first emails I wrote was to Gabriela Herman, who is a photographer that I had seen at a B&H talk and followed her over the years. I had reached out to her previously and was like, hey, I'd really love to assist you. I'm just like a photographer looking to get started. And she had contacted me, but like one time when I worked at the coffee shop, but it was sort of like, oh, we need someone next day. And I was like, oh man, like that's kind of how it works. It's like you need that flexibility. And I just like had too much integrity to call out. Anyway, fast forward to 2017, we end up connecting. And actually, this is why this whole 24 hours was so memorable, because I get fired, reach out to Gab, and she says, I have a shoot tomorrow if you're free in Midtown at a theater with Michael Urie. And I was like, I will be there. And so next day, I'm holding a light, following her around backstage with a celebrity for whatever show he was in for the New York Times. And I was like, okay. I just like took that as a huge sign from the universe that I was like, this is going to work this time. I started cleaning apartments as well. And that ended up being perfect. And I always thought of David Sedaris because he also cleaned apartments in New York when he was like getting his start as a writer. So I felt a lot of solidarity with him. Also, during this time, I decided to move to Brooklyn because I had spent more time there, met more people, and just like really loved the vibe a little bit more than Harlem. And so I made my way down. I lived in Bushwick for 6, I think, or 9 months, and then found an opening in Carroll Gardens at this corner apartment unit over a Chinese restaurant. Right on the border of Red Hook, and it was like my favorite place ever. I put my information on, I think, care.com or something like that, made a profile. This person contacted me. She was like my favorite apartment to clean for because it was like already so clean, and it was like really fun to be in like fancy apartments and just like imagine myself living there. And I ended up getting like 12 clients there, probably total, including caring for a dog. I cleaned up after like some like a Passover dinner one time, and I like helped cater for this percussion group that was releasing a CD. It was like the most adventurous time, and I think looking back now, I think that's why I went to New York. Like that was why I went there, just because like everything was so unexpected and anything could happen. And there were definitely lulls in income and jobs, but then there was the excitement of like getting a call and being like, oh, someone passed your number along. Like, can you, assist the shoot or whatever. And so it was just like, I always look back at it as like the most exciting time and probably most stressful, but so fun. So from Carroll Gardens, the pandemic set in 2020. And I was kind of thinking, I'm not sure how much longer I can do this unpredictable life, as much fun as it was. I just remember this one shoot I was on with Gab, and I just was like, I think this is the last time I'm going to do this. And I didn't know why. I was like, I can't imagine telling her I can't do this anymore. But I just kind of felt like this gut knowing. And then cut to just like maybe a week or so later, it was like shut down. And so I was thinking about moving out of the city and was so conflicted, but my friends I remembered from the office job, they moved to Providence and just loved it. And they're like, people from New York have moved here. They really love it. There's so many like artists and cool things going on. So I was like, okay, let me try it. So I made plans to move in June of 2020. And I was getting so much unemployment assistance because there was just, the government was just being so generous all of a sudden. It was crazy. So I was kind of like saving a lot of that. And then my friend Nora and her husband Alex helped me move to Providence. So we stayed in an Airbnb. I ended up staying in one for a month while I looked for an apartment and a car and all of that, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, why was I starting over in a new city at that time? But so the crazy part is that as I was leaving, and like the thing is with the benefits, I wasn't able to continue to claim them out of state. Even if you traveled out of state and still lived, I think there was an issue. So I was like giving that up. But the week I was moving, I saw on this one Instagram friend's story that he was looking for like kind of an office assistant because he was a real estate photographer and people were moving out of New York like crazy. So he was so busy just scheduling like people to make floor plans and shooting, photos for the listings. for all these agents. And so I reached out and I was like, hey, I actually like need a job. And he's like, oh my gosh, can you start like tomorrow? And so I had a job like day one living in Providence because it was remote and it was just perfect. And in hindsight, it was another thing that I'm like, that's crazy that worked out, because what was I going to do? Like, what was I going to do? Everything was like in such shutdown and modified services. I'm sure I would have found something, but like, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, thank goodness that worked out. So I ended up working from home from Providence, and I think 6 months in, I was like ready to leave again. I just was like so lonely. It was terrible. And I don't know where would have been a better place to go. Like, sometimes I think maybe I should have come back to Minneapolis at that time, because at least I could like hang out with my family or something, and I wouldn't have to worry about like who's in a bubble, who's quarantining, because everyone had such different standards for what they thought was okay. I mean, the loneliness was like I've never experienced ever before. And I know I'm not alone in that. It was wild that we were all in the same boat, and it was just awful. So I really wanted to leave Providence, and it wasn't Providence's fault, but I just felt like this feels like a hometown. And if I'm going to live in a hometown, I'd rather live in my hometown, where at least I have my family around and like can spend time with my nephews and nieces and stuff. So I remember I would just like go to the beach, like pick up a breakfast sandwich at a new place to try, and just go to the beach and just like sit in my car or sit on the beach and tan or whatever. Like, I had nothing to do. So I was like, let me just move back to New York, because I just felt like I was missing out, and I felt like I wasn't done living there. All of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm good. I guess I just needed like a break. So I moved back to New York, and as I'm moving back, the job sort of ends because he wanted to kind of like consolidate roles with someone else. And the demand was like kind of going down a little bit at that point too. And so I was like, okay, great. Well, I just made plans, but he was like super generous about it. He like paid me an extra 6 weeks while I like looked for jobs. And so I really like worked hard to get started on that, and then also reached out to like old contacts and was like, hey, I'm in town, like if you need a photo assistant, we can do this whole thing again while I find something else. I reached out to my contact Paul, who we had done a few shoots like in Philly and around the city. We also did a shoot at a law firm for their headshots. So I was assisting, and his contact there was like, oh, we can't find this person to fill this role. Like, we've been looking for so long and whatever. And I was like, oh, well, I'm looking for like an office job, like something more stable. I have a business degree and somewhat of a business background. And just like, oh, okay, well, send me your info, whatever. So I submitted my resume and all that, and ended up getting the job. I ended up working there for 2.5 years. And probably about like 1 year in or so, I was just like getting the itch again to move. And I was like, this bums me out so much, because I loved New York. I felt like I made it through that 2-year mark of like, this is really hard, when will it get better? And then like gaining and losing friends, gaining and losing like so much over the 10 years. And like, you kind of get used to this like heartbreak of like constant change. Even if you are staying the same and like staying in one place, like people move around you. And I moved into my place in Clinton Hill and was like, okay, I'm going to stay here. Like, this is a really great roommate, great apartment, good deal. And then she ended up having to move because of her immigration status and her visa status, and which I think was good timing for her anyway. But something I hoped would stay the same was changing once again. And so I was getting really tired of that. And I was feeling this shift of like, okay, I've been here for a long time, and now all these newer people are coming to the city, and it's just an interesting vibe to be on like the other end of things. And so the last year, I would say I just took advantage of everything New York could offer me. And I just pretended like, okay, what if I lived somewhere else right now? What would I be wishing I was doing in this city now? So it's like going to a play, going to these concerts, going to museums, and just biking around the city. I loved, eating all the bagels and just doing everything I could. And I'm really proud of myself for making the most of the last year, because I just was feeling kind of lonely again and whatever. And I think this is also just a part of my chart, and being a Sagittarius moon, and like there's just something in me that needs change. Like I just get unsettled if I sit for too long, which can be exhausting but exciting at the same time. So in the last year, I told my older sister, because she had never visited me in New York, and I was like, I think you should come visit, like, when you can, soon. And I think at that time I had already kind of decided to move. I just didn't know when or how that looked like. So anyway, she made the trip, and it was like so special and really fun. We ended up looking for our grandmother's grave site in this really, what is it called? Something Wood Cemetery, Greenwood Cemetery in Windsor Terrace area. And we never found it, just because like things were so like unmarked, like not really well maintained with the tombstones and stuff. But it was special to like leave flowers, and it was something I always meant to do like when I lived there. So it was like really special to do it together. And then our grandmother also worked at a hospital in Brooklyn that was like very close to my apartment at the time. So we went through there, and in the lobby of the hospital we're like taking a picture of the facade and stuff. But yeah, that was really awesome. So I think that pretty much wraps up like the chronology of my career, at least, which kind of like framed a lot of my experience in New York and dictated where I lived and my community and stuff. But overall, I had really great roommates. I'd love to share more about New York. I love the city. I just fell in love with its history, with architecture. There was like a period of time where I read so many books about New York, like novels, history books. My favorite history book is Broadway, A History in 13 Miles. And it goes bottom to top of like the history of Broadway Street. And it's fantastic. Starts in the financial district, goes all the way up to Inwood, and I loved it. It was like so cool to read about it and then just like notice all these things. It's just like a puzzle to explore and learn at every corner. Like there's just like hidden gems like everywhere, especially in the architecture. It's such a collage. But yeah, I'd love to share more, and let me know if you have any questions or have a similar story about living in New York. It makes me so curious about other cities. And I always say, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere in terms of the transportation. Because if you can figure out the subway system, you can figure out any transit in any other city. So in that way, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.